You're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall, retired Marine Intelligence Officer and host of the Strap podcast. Hal Kempfer here with me to discuss the latest on the Middle East. Hal, before the break, we were listening to President Trump's remarks. He did a gaggle with reporters. A lot of news coming out of the White House as of late. Multiple outlets saying that the U.S. is sending thousands of additional Marines and sailors to the Middle East, although no decision has been made to send troops into Iran itself yet. Hal, what are you hearing about this new deployment, and is this the type of group that could help with a potential ground operation?
Well, Austin, the answer, very short, is yes. It's actually turning into a very substantial force. The Marine Expeditionary Unit that's normally in the Pacific, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit that comes out of Okinawa, Japan, that has been steaming that direction. It's past Singapore, past the Straits of Malacca. It's somewhere out in the middle of the Indian Ocean right now. And then we found out that the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which comes out of California, Southern California, and these are regular rotating things. These are not like something where we suddenly, mobilized a group to go out there. They're on regular rotations. But the 11th MU out of Southern California actually got pushed up about 5 or 6 weeks from its normal deployment time. Now, its normal deployment time is it's not a fixed date. It's kept classified for obvious reasons. It deals with military movements, but it's going to go on somewhere around the 1st of May, end of April. Well, it got moved up and it's already out the door. And then I just saw that the Marine Expeditionary Unit that comes out of the East Coast, out of Norfolk, Virginia, a lot of stuff sourced out of North Carolina, that they are getting rerouted and heading towards the Middle East as well. So what you'll have is 3 MUs, which is a lot of capability. That's something, if you wanted to go island hopping to the Persian Gulf, that's what you'd want, is a lot of capability to do that. So yes, it's rather substantial. The next thing I'm going to be watching is to see if we send a Marine Expeditionary Brigade Command Group under a 1-star. That will be very telling.
So this afternoon, Trump was asked about his plans for Karg Island. Let's pull up some video of Karg while we're at it. The U.S. released some video of the strikes that they performed on the island within the past week or two. President Trump was asked about if he has any plans to have U.S. forces further target the island. He responded, "I may have a plan, I may not," and then he said he wouldn't tell reporters one way or the other. Hal, if the U.S. did decide to do a ground operation, what would make more strategic sense, going in at a place like Karg Island or going in on the Iranian mainland shores in the Gulf, or are there other islands, as you allude to, that you'd be looking at? What would make the most strategic sense?
Well, going ashore, you take a lot of risk on, because if the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps or the Iranian army itself, the Artesh, could actually reinforce that area, you could end up with a pitched fight. These are not heavy-duty ground forces. This is not the sort of stuff we use to go into, Kuwait during Desert Storm. This is not what we, went up to Baghdad with during the opening part of Iraqi freedom. These are not huge forces. They're very capable, though. They're probably, I'd say the best in the world at doing what we call amphibious raids. So doing things like taking small islands, hitting some of the larger islands. Some of there are islands that are actually in the sea lanes, the commercial sea lanes under international law, under UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. There are sea lanes clearly identified for international traffic. There's a couple of islands in there, Greater Tomb and Lesser Tomb. They're pretty small islands. They can be easily taken by the Marines. There's another island, it's a little bit larger, Abu Musa, just south of that sea lane. That also is one that the Marines might want to look at taking. By the way, I should mention that they are claimed as sovereign territory of the UAE, and that the Shah of Iran actually took it by force back in the early 70s. So if we did take those islands, I imagine the UAE would say, well, as long as you got them, do you mind if we go over and occupy them? And that would probably happen. And then you have that long, skinny island. You see it right there, Strait of Hormuz. You see that long, skinny island. That's Keshem Island. Yeah, that's Keshem. And it's got actually a longer name than that, but we just call it Keshem. And that one actually has a lot of people living on it. It's got a very big airport. So that would be probably a little too much to take with the Marines at hand. However, doing a lot of amphibious raids, hitting various sites. That's one of the places the Revolutionary Guard Corps hide small boats, midget submarines, all sorts of things, revetments for anti-ship missiles. So there's a lot of targets there. And then, of course, if you were to go further up the Gulf, up to the north, that's where you see Cork Island. That's where 90% of the oil that comes out of Iran goes through Cork Island. And rather than destroy it and blow it up, I think we would prefer, if we had choice, to take it. And we may have the forces on hand where we could actually pull that off.
You know, the word ceasefire has been thrown around today. President Trump said today that he would talk with Iranian leaders, but he's not interested in talking with them about a ceasefire. He said, quote, "You don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side," unquote. Hal, what could the two sides talk about if they did talk? What could the two sides get out of talking to each other if it's not about a ceasefire?
Well, it's about the political goals and objectives. One of the big problems we have is, one of our goals, stated goals, and this is our goal, this is Israel's goal, is to get that nuclear material, that enriched uranium. That is a very, very difficult operation. That's the site or sites are well inside Iran, and getting in there isn't just a matter of a quick, one and done, get out of there, get out. You have to go in there, and then you have to work your way through all those tunnels, all those facilities, looking for all the nuclear material. Much of it will be hidden, no doubt, and it could literally take weeks to work through that. That's a long time if you're in enemy territory and they're gunning for you. So if something could be arranged on that, some sort of compromise where they allow us to remove that enriched uranium, that might be something they could actually talk about. But President Trump is correct. There really isn't, and from a military perspective, there isn't a lot to talk about. But they could also talk about not targeting gas and oil fields and not targeting refineries and processing plants, and also obviously opening up the Strait of Hormuz.
Hal, President Trump has sent out a number of Truth Social posts today. One of them said, "Without the USA, NATO is a paper tiger. They didn't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Now that fight is militarily won. With very little danger for them. They complain about the high oil prices they are forced to pay, but don't want to help open the Strait of Hormuz. It's a simple military maneuver that is the single reason for the high oil prices. So easy for them to do with so little risk. Cowards. And we will remember," the president says. It's worth asking again, Hal, from NATO's perspective, why might it not make strategic sense to help secure Hormuz?
Well, first off, they were very much involved. The only time they've ever invoked Article 5 was when they came to the aid of the United States after 9/11, and they sent forces to Iraq and sent forces to Afghanistan. And yes, they were in there in the thick of things just as much as we were. And so in that regard, they know what it's like to fight in the Middle East. They've been doing it for a couple of decades after 9/11, and they're very familiar with it. And they're concerned about getting bogged down in this big war against Iran. They don't know which way this is going to go. Frankly, despite some of the things that we say that it's going to be over very soon, and I think it probably has a very good chance of being over very soon, but they're afraid of getting bogged down and stuck there. Then they have their own concerns in the Baltic, in the Arctic, all along Eastern Europe with Russia, maintain their support for the Ukraine. They've got a lot to worry about there. So they're worried that taking on something like this would, A, not be popular. The other thing, too, is in that lack of popularity, they also have large communities within their countries that are Muslim, that are from the Middle East. And in the past, they have been targeted with terrorism and other things, which really caused a lot of damage politically and otherwise to their countries and to their governments that came from their policies in the Middle East. And they don't want to open up what they would see as a kind of Pandora's box of domestic anti-government, anti-policy sort of demonstrations, or even worse, potential terrorist attacks in their own countries. And they recognize it would not be a very popular thing if they did that by choice. So they're holding back. On the other hand, they by far get much more oil and gas from the Middle East and from the Persian Gulf than we do. So they have a much more vested interest. We don't get really a lot of oil and natural gas from there. we actually produce, we in some places we export oil and natural gas. So we actually are in a pretty safe position. Asia, on the other hand, they're the ones that really import a lot of oil and gas from the Middle East. And they have a very vested interest in maintaining that waterway and getting this war over with sooner rather than later.
So I saw another post from the president earlier today. He said that the Hormuz Strait will have to be guarded and policed as necessary by other nations who use it. The United States does not use it, he says. If asked, he says he will help other countries in their Hormuz efforts if they want to help police the area. What countries could do that, Hal? What countries would make sense? Who imports the most, as you just alluded to? If we're talking about Asian countries, what would be some of the ones you would think Trump is, I don't know, maybe hinting at in his most recent Truth Social post?
Japan and South Korea immediately come to mind. They import a lot. I think Japan gets 90. Actually, President Trump, when he was talking earlier, said 95%. I had to go back and check that. I forgot it was that high. I thought they were getting more from Malaysia. Not more overall, but I thought they were offsetting that. But it is actually still 95% of their oil comes from the Middle East. That is a lot. 70% of that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So they obviously have a vested interest. They are not a country by their constitution that's allowed to send their troops into an active combat zone. That was something that we imposed on them after World War II when we helped draft their constitution. So they'd have to do a lot of changes. Although I would point out they have been going through changes. There's actually a Japanese military presence in the Horn of Africa in Djibouti, right near Bab el-Mandeb, across the water from where the Houthis have been targeting ships and doing something similar to what the Iranians are doing now. So they have been in that region. They are aware of it. Also, South Korea obviously gets a tremendous amount of oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. These are two Asian countries. And the other one that's kind of a little bit different is talking about China. And I don't know that we want a larger Chinese military presence in the Middle East. In fact, I kind of felt our policy was to push back on a larger Chinese military presence in the Middle East. And he's mentioned that a couple of times, that China could do something. I think that's something that needs to be reviewed. I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the Pentagon which would see the double edge of that sword. And but China does import a lot of oil, and they have a huge vested interest in keeping the Strait of Hormuz open.
If China was policing the Strait, then would you even need to protect it from the Iranians? The Iranians wouldn't be targeting the Chinese if they were policing it, right?
It's a very interesting political dynamic. They have, by practice, allowed tankers, while this has all been going on, they have allowed a few tankers, I think about 1.7, 1.8 billion barrels of oil in tankers to go through the Strait of Hormuz. They've also allowed some tankers and some other ships going to India, and they even allowed a ship that was going to Pakistan to go through it. So they have been doing that. Now, I'm going to kind of throw out something kind of interesting. Another country nobody's been talking about is Pakistan, which is on the eastern side of Iran. They actually share a big border. Pakistan has a mutual defense treaty with Saudi Arabia. Pakistan also has a pretty good sized navy. And it could be that Saudi Arabia would try to invoke that mutual defense treaty and say, hey, Pakistan, can you come over and help open up the straits and patrol the straits with your naval presence and maybe put some boots on the ground or something for some other things? So that's kind of interesting. And then there's a third thing, something that came up, well, it kind of came up with that mutual defense treaty, something Pakistan has that none of these other countries have, nuclear weapons. Well, China and the U.S. do, and Britain, but Britain's not there yet. So that is kind of an interesting thing that it would be actually inviting a nuclear power to take part in whatever's going on there. But it's an interesting, quirky thing. But when you get into the maritime domain, some of these unusual relationships kind of come together to combine, for making these combined task force type things that we're seeing here.
One more thing. I was reading that the U.S. has moved quite a bit of Patriot defense systems out of Europe and into the Middle East, given everything that's been going on here. We have some videos of what these defense systems look like. When a sizable number of these types of defense systems get moved out of Europe, Hal, does that leave gaps in the defense systems in Europe?
Potentially, yes, depending on how the coverage is going. We've been putting a lot of pressure on the Europeans to beef up their own self-defense capabilities, their own militaries. And so I don't know specifically what gaps pulling a certain thing out, a certain Patriot missile battery out would cause. Obviously, I'm sure the Europeans would love if we just kept all of our air defense systems that are in Europe. But we have, big needs down in the Persian Gulf, and frankly, since the NATO countries are not providing any forces to keep the Persian Gulf open, I think certainly President Trump would say, "Why am I providing these air defense for NATO when NATO won't help us keep, patrol the Strait of Hormuz?" That would be the rationale that would probably be articulated there. The other thing that's along with this is we're pushing this system called MAROPS. MAROPS is actually developed in conjunction with the Ukrainians, is a smaller drone. It's a drone interceptor. With these missiles, it costs a tremendous amount of money to take out a Shahed drone. The MAROPS are very inexpensive, about $15,000 a piece, and they have a very good record of intercepting drones. So we're pushing those out as well, and there's a tremendous amount of MAROPS assets being moved to the Middle East, being moved to all our allies in the Middle East to help them deal with the drone threat.
Hal Kempfer is a retired Marine intelligence officer and the host of the Strat podcast. You can listen to Strat anywhere podcasts are available. Hal and I will be on tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. See you tomorrow.